we are live. So, yeah, we don't have any audience yet. So we can chat for a minute just in case somebody's getting the notification and is really excited.
Yeah. How did your event on Saturday go with John Lurie?
It was great. It was really fun. Similar to the podcast, So, yeah, if anyone is interested in the healing power of nature and John Lurie, who's got a fascinating story, he authored Clyde Bellecourt's memoir. And if you don't know who Clyde Bellecourt is, he was the founder of the American Indian movement. So The Thunder Before the Storm is John's first book. And then he's got a memoir, Canoeing with Jose, which is about his two-man canoe trip up the Red River between the Minnesota-North Dakota border, across Canada and out to Hudson Bay. And he was working on a new memoir. So we focused on the healing power of nature and had an audience of people who love the outdoors and love books. And it was fun. It was really good.
Yeah. It was a really fun podcast episode to listen to. So I was hoping the event itself went really well.
Thank you. Yeah, it did. It was very fun. Yeah, so if anyone's interested in that episode, it's our most recent. It'll be top of the page at storyworkspodcast.com. Did you freeze, Kathryn? I lost Kathryn. Oh, there you go. I can't do this alone because I'm not prepared. So,
Well, it just said my internet is unstable. So hopefully it'll stabilize out
mm-hmm.
and calm down.
Yes. Hello, Anna. Welcome. Good to not see you, but good to see your name again.
Yes.
Yay. So, what do we want to talk about today?
I am going to throw you something about kind of taking a spin on Write What You Know, because I have been enjoying all of these podcast episodes with authors who really genuinely are passionate about their topics, about what they're writing about. Stephanie was very passionate. John was very passionate. Beth, who's coming out soon, is very passionate. Paulette's very passionate about what they're writing about. And they spend a lot of time. I'm also sorry, I forgot about Julia, J.E. Viner. They spend a lot of time researching, a lot of time digging into their thing. And it made me think about kind of that oft told craft advice, write what you know, but kind of spinning it into a like, write what you love.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think about that process of research and of really digging into your topic in order to know it well enough to present it wholly, right? So not just in pieces, but as a whole.
Right.
And now my computer is freaking out. There we go. So I'm going to start by asking a bit of a personal question about what you write, because I know you write historical fiction, but you've also written some different contemporary fiction with some pretty deep themes. So I wanted to ask, how do you get inspired? What catches your attention? And what's the process like for you to really get to know that topic that you're interested in?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so with my current work in progress, which is inspired by and deeply researched into, I am deeply researching, it's about the eugenics movement here in Minnesota in the interwar years, 1920s and 1930s. And so as far as the first part, inspiration goes, it was something I heard about. I don't remember where I first heard it, but I heard about these girls who were being institutionalized for reasons of moral judgment, right? Somebody said, misbehaving, you don't belong in society. Let's, shut you up, basically. And I thought that was intriguing. I knew there was a story there because I love historical fiction. I love learning about people's lives and what life was really like in that era or in those circumstances or, um so I just kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And over the course of months, maybe even a year, it kept crossing my path. There was like
Mhm.
country on PBS. And then my son came home from college and said, "Hey, we just read this article in school and it happened to be about this." And I'm like, okay, is this a message? And, that's not to say that our ideas have to come packaged with this kind of external influence or some kind of
Right.
message of the universe. But I think when there's a story we need to tell that's really compelling us to write it, we're going to get the signs. And it might be as simple as I can't let go of that idea. That wheel keeps turning, it keeps crossing my thoughts, or it might be more explicit, like somebody handing you an article and saying, read this, right? Um,
Mhm.
so Yeah, the inspiration starts with fascination. Um, and then tell me the next part of the question. Or I'll
Well, I think
talking.
it kind of moves into that idea of then you have to start researching, right? So how do you know when you reach the point that you are ready to start writing it? When you know enough about it, when you've reached that point of authority?
Mm. Yeah, so I research and write at the same time. So with this particular book, when I moved from just thinking about an idea and it not letting go of me into actually researching it, I knew I was ready and willing to take it on as a project, right? Like I could have written
Mhm.
those, I could have kept it on the back burner and in the journal for some day, but it it became pressing. So then I started gathering research materials, finding books, digging. I did dig online, but it's interesting. I started this particular book, the research for it at the end of 2018. And there wasn't that much online about this topic. But then over these 5 years or so, so many archives have been digitized.
Mhm.
A lot of material turning up online that is pertinent to what I'm doing that wasn't there 5 years ago. So it really was about going to like the Historical Society's library. So it's putting in the time and following that fascination, you know. And as I'm doing that, the research is giving me ideas and giving me clues to my character's story. So I'm keeping the journal. So I'm doing the discovery writing and the pre-writing while I research, you know. And as I do that, I start shaping the plot and I'm thinking a lot about the facts of the matter, like where would my character have lived? What would her background have been like? That's the beginning of my story. What was the institution like? What kind of girls were there? How were they treated? What were the positives, like the education? What were the negatives, right? We can all imagine a lot of those. So that helps me shape my plot. And
Mhm.
it's happening together, you know. And then there's that point where I've got, if not an entire storyboard, an entire book outlined, I know my key points on it. And I have a sense of what I need to fill in and what materials I'm going to be drawing from to do that filling in. So then I really get writing.
Right. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Hmm. Would you say there are indicators while you're writing that you haven't gone deep enough, that you don't know enough, and then you know you need to hit the research once more?
Yeah. If I get stuck whenever I don't know what I'm doing, I'm like, oh, go back to the research. I was just, yeah, so I'm working through at least a second, maybe a third pass on this one part of the novel where my protagonist is in the institution, and I had written, hundreds. Longhand, I'd written a lot, like tons of pages with a certain set of characters and a certain situation in the school, and I decided to scrap all of that and keep her in the delinquent cottage, right, at this institution. And now I had no idea what I was going to do with her. I just knew she was going to stay there with these particular supporting characters. So I went back to my research journals and started reading through those and just puzzling over everything. How can this fall into place? Where do I need her to get to? Asking those basic plot questions like, what is her goal and what are the obstacles to that goal? And because she's institutionalized, she's very limited, right?
Mhm.
So her goal has to be within those bounds. And I think it was similar with saving Annabelle because while Greta wasn't in an institution, it was the 1860s and 1870s in rural Minnesota. And, you don't have cars. I mean, at one point she did get a horse, right? And so she had a little bit of freedom. She could walk to town, but then she's really under her father's rule as the head of the household to some degree and bound by her duties and obligations to the family. So whatever your story, it's the same kind of problem. Like what
Right.
world, how does my character operate inside of that? And when I get stuck, that's when I go back to the research and look at what I've already discovered, do more digging, look for new resources. Because the inspiration is really in the research.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine you want to do your best to present it as a whole, give it nice you don't wanna just stereotype or a cardboard, especially with something as delicate as eugenics movement, you wanna be able to present it as wholly as possible. So,
Right.
all right, we have a question from Anna. This is a really good one, Anna, I like that. So, you mentioned your storyboard. Is it normal for your storyboard to become less detailed the closer you get to the end?
No.
I think I understand where she's coming from. I feel like I always thin out as I'm originally developing the idea. I might not have as much information at the end, but I feel like the closer you get to writing the end, your storyboard should fill up, right? Like, you should be able to know what's happening.
Yes. No, this is very true. I think there's writing a storyboard for somebody else. Like when I have clients write storyboards for me to critique, they need to be complete. So then
Right.
the onus is on the client to do that work and really develop it in order to get good, constructive feedback. If you're just doing it for yourself, I can see where it might thin out toward the end, and then you're building that storyboard as you're approaching it and as you learn more, and that could certainly work. I wouldn't say don't ever do that or that's wrong. 'Cause, certainly that would be fine if it's working for you. I just wouldn't want to see it get so thinned out that you start feeling uncertain or lost, right? Like having a clear target is helpful,
Mhm.
and it might thin out in the sense of requiring less information on the page because you've already established your supporting characters, you've already established your world, you already know everybody's motives and such. So in that sense, you can be more focused on what's happening, and how it's happening and less on kind of all the material that surrounds that.
Yeah. I think this probably also speaks to what kind of writer you are and how much you like to prepare before you start writing, and whether your draft informs your outline or your outline informs your draft.
hmm Right. And there are times when you do your work and you storyboard and develop everything. And then as you get going, you realize I'm gonna change it, like I'm gonna
Mhm.
scrap these reams of handwritten pages and stick with these other characters. That does happen. And that's okay as long as you're doing the work and it works, you don't lose your way, right?
Yeah,
I still know,
absolutely.
I still know where my protagonist is heading, where I need to get her to. So it's just some of the how and who with and in that middle that I've decided to change.
Yep, cool. All right, I'm gonna move into other genres and stories other than historical fiction because research and developing is not just obviously, it's not just for historical fiction, and so you can have, like, a writer who's creating, like, a character they have no experience with, whether that's a career they've never had, a gender that they aren't, a culture they don't come from, etcetera. What advice would you give to them in terms of where their research kinda ends and the writing should start?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's the same answer no matter what the situation is. The research ends and the writing begins when you're comfortable and confident, right? When you feel like you're ready to put that character on the page, for example, or you know enough about that profession to write it competently. And then I think the research and the writing overlap, you know.
Mhm.
So you're still developing and you're still checking yourself and saying, am I on track? Am I going wrong here? And that's something all writers need to do, right? We
Yeah,
can't only write what we know. And I like the phrase you used, Catherine, write what you love, right?
yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Loving it because you're fascinated by it, loving it because, you might even be writing the thing that scares you, right?
Mhm.
What you want to explore. If you
Yeah.
drive to go there, then you you start with the research, you do the exploratory or developmental writing, and when you feel that call to put words on page, they start flowing, right? And it's looking more like a scene or more like a voice or whatever. Get that down and then
Mhm.
keep going and have that overlap of research and writing.
Yeah. We had, when we had Stephanie, I'm gonna say her last name wrong, Elizondo Grist, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
On the podcast, she wrote this book has very beautiful vignettes of all these different people, right? And that's where I kinda got this feeling of write what you love. It's like she loved these people, and so she presented them in such a whole way, that you didn't feel like she was taking their story, you felt like she was presenting their story in a very beautiful and respectful way. And I thought that to me kind of changed that dynamic for me from write what you know, do your research to really love it and want to share it in a way that's meaningful. Um, so I'm going to move into like kind of a theme question if
Mhm.
I can find it, because I feel like if you write what you love and you write something you're passionate about, that maybe the theme would come a little more naturally from that story that you're researching or developing. Do you think I guess that's the question. Does writing what you love naturally provide a theme, or is it something that maybe the theme comes first for in a situation like that?
Yeah, theme is one of those really tricky things for writers because it is so intangible, unlike plot. You
Mhm.
say what the book is about in terms of plot. And I find when I ask writers what their story is about in terms of theme, it gets hard to pin them down, right? and and I think a lot of writers want to give you four or five things. And, I say yes, but I want you to pick one and everything else feeds into that, right? They're like tributaries to a river. So if you've got the Mississippi River is your theme and think of all the things that flow into that. What's your Mississippi? Give me that one. And everything else will function in service to that theme. And if it doesn't, then we can end up feeling a little soft, a little open for interpretation, a little like everything's not coming together as strongly and as cohesively as it could, right? So,
Mhm.
do we get the theme while we're writing? Yes, quite often we do. Is it helpful to identify it in advance? Yes, very helpful, right? Um, what I want writers to do is know your theme by the time you get through your first draft.
Mhm.
While you're writing that first draft, have a good solid idea of it, but be open to changing as the story develops, right? To say, know your theme, identify it, get it in writing, lock it in the developmental stages doesn't seem to work. Most of us are figuring that piece out as we go through it, and we're excited to be surprised by our characters or to watch the plot take a turn. So, if you get to the end of your first draft and you don't know what it is, it's time to do some work. Go think about, try to get it in.
Definitely. Alright.
Mhm.
Um, but, well, like, when you're struck with that first inspiration of something that is as, like, powerful as, like, your novel about the eugenics movement, did you find that you had, like, a feeling you were trying to express a certain direction of that, like, that theme from that initially, or was that something that came later as you were presenting it? So, because I feel like if you had something like that show up in your life, you'd have an opinion, a vision, a thing that you felt about it, and in the research, maybe that changes slightly, but does it feel more message driven than maybe other types of stories?
Um, Not more message driven, no, but I think, you know what, um, so with this story in particular, because you asked about it in particular, what I'm really interested in is exploring the fabric of society. You know, not just my protagonist has this problem in this set of circumstances, but how is this part of American culture? How
Mhm.
did this happen? How are so many people buying into it? And what did it mean? And what does that reveal to us about today? You know, so I think a lot of us, myself included, start a story with theme being malleable, right?
Mhm.
What we want to explore, and we know how we feel about it. But then as we're exploring it, we're also exploring what other characters are thinking and feeling about it, especially in this case, because it's omniscient point of view. You know, in other stories, less so. And so we're on a journey of discovery that gets us to that theme, which, we want to be able to like put on a bumper sticker, this book is about. Um, and that's hard. That's kind of the hardest piece of it. So I don't know, did I answer your question or did I go
So,
on?
I think so. We do have a couple more people joining. Hello to Michael and Kathleen. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we will get to it. I'm just asking questions because that's what I'm here for. So we'll get to yours too. All right. Pitfalls of writing what you love is maybe that you're too precious or too close to it, something that you've really deeply fallen into passion for. Can be hard to present negative aspects, maybe, or positives if you're trying really hard to define send a message. So maybe it's appropriate to say we need some distance or that we need to love it enough to show all sides. Where do you think the balance is there between loving it and being willing to maybe show things that aren't as lovable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between writing what you love in the sense of Oh, I love it, right? It's so dear to me.
Mhm.
It's of love, like, I'm driven, I have passion for this topic, I want to explore it, I want to go into it deep, I want to reveal what there is to be revealed, right? And so, um, with the first one, with things being precious, I find sometimes writers like their protagonists so much, they are too nice, you know,
Mhm.
is nicey nice. And their protagonist doesn't suffer enough to write a really great story. With the other sense of love, it comes down to some self awareness, right? So
Mhm.
distance, definitely being able to step back and say, what is the story I want to tell, right? What is the truth I want to explore and reveal? And then you can look at your writing with a critical eye. Am I accomplishing that? Because then your writing isn't in service to like a character you feel protective for or who's dear. Your writing is in service to something greater than the story, right? Like whatever that aspect of being human is for your particular novel. So
Yeah. So if you don't love your story, if you don't know it on that level, do you think that you can do it justice still, or do you think you're gonna miss out?
I think it depends on the story, the writer, and, you know, the genre and your goal, right? If you're writing a psychological thriller, what you love about it and what makes you feel driven to pursue it might be the intricacies of the puzzle, the
Mhm.
creating that plot line. And so that's great. I mean, go for that. And you don't, you know, with the other, when you get more intellectual or philosophical about it, when you're less plot driven and more driven by the intangibles of theme, then yes. My clock just wound down.
No, you're good. Well, yeah, and I like that even with, like, a psychological thriller or something that is a little more plot driven, like, knowing your puzzles, knowing how to manipulate that, doing your research on mental games or on, the way that people act or, all of this is still so important and things that you should know in order to present it in a way that is really meaningful or that challenges the reader, right? Because they may not be able to think through it the same way that you have because you've done the research or you've done the work on the back end.
Right, yes, and that's what I love about mysteries. You know, that's why I've got the Scott Hall books. I was just I'm getting the second Scott Hall ready to put back out into the world. And I was going through the draft earlier this year and thinking, oh, this is pretty darn dark. Gosh, please, why are you writing about this stuff? And then, but then I I went online and looked at some stuff and I was like, well, oh, there really are people like this. Things like this really do happen. And so this story is I wrote it because one, why does this happen? Why do we have people like that? How do they affect other people's lives? What is that like? And then two, it's really fun to do mysteries, to think,
Mhm.
how do I put all these pieces together and reveal things to the reader in such a way that the reader gets to go on this really exciting ride of discovery, of uncovering what happened along with the protagonist and hopefully really enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to read the second one because, you know, I enjoyed the first one. All right. Well, that wraps up my questions. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and do the kind of admin stuff here while you guys have a chance to ask any questions. So we typically do our live streams on Mondays. However, it's June and we have trips. So we are moving the next live stream to Friday, June the 20th. It will stay at 3 p.m. Central Time. So just watch for the notifications on that. And we will be here Friday, June 20th. For any questions, drop them in the post on the Substack and or leave them for Alida. You can, yeah, leave them there. Um, sorry, that was a really strong call there. All right. So if nobody has any other questions, um, I think that does it for me. Anything else, Alita?
No, just thank you to everybody who stopped in. Um,
Absolutely.
fun, and we will see you on the 20th. And if you are in the contemporary romance writers genre, I will be teaching at their virtual conference later this summer. Also, if you're with London Writers Salon, I will be teaching for London Writers Salon. I think that one is August 7th, and I'm going to get all of these things up at wordessential.com/events. So, yeah, I'd love to see you, meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. Must be coffee time. All right. Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, everybody.